Welcome to the 35th Anderson Sport Performance Lecture. Paul Rogers is Professor of Law in the Detman School of Law at SMU, where he has taught since 1980. He was Dean of the Law School from 1989 to 1997. Dean Rogers has served for 25 years as SMU's faculty athletic representative. He currently is on the National Football Foundation's Award Committee, as well as the SMU Sports Hall of Fame Selection Committee. Paul Rogers previously served on the Division 1A Faculty Athletic Representative Board of Directors and on the NCAA's Academic Eligibility and Compliance Cabinet. He was president of the Southwest Conference, which was the conference for schools mostly in Texas from 1991 to 1993, and formerly was a member of the Cotton Bowl Board of Directors. An avid baseball historian, Rogers has authored 4 books and numerous articles on baseball history, including The Whiz Kids and the 1950 pennant with his boyhood hero, Robin Roberts, who was a pitcher on that team. At SMU, Rogers has taught courses on antitrust, contracts, sales of goods, and business torts. He is an author of Antitrust Law, Policy and Practice, which is a casebook in its 4th edition. Paul Rogers received his BA and JD from the University of Texas at Austin and an LLM from Columbia. Please welcome Dean Paul Rogers as our 35th Anderson Sport Performance Lecture. So I think I've got 2 microphones here, I'm not sure.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Barry. It's really a great pleasure to be here today, and special thanks to Barry for inviting me. This is an impressive lecture series with a lot of speakers, great speakers, and a great heritage. And I'm really honored to be part of it. Well, as you can tell from Dr. McCune's introduction, I've been involved in sports in a number of ways my entire life, and I'm somebody who loves athletics. I particularly love college athletics, and I've been involved in SMU's athletics since right after the death penalty in the 80s. But I'm here to maybe talk a little caution. I think as a society we've overdone some aspects of sports. The fact is that our society loves, adores, and glorifies winners. It's not a new phenomenon. But I would argue that our idolizing of winning teams and star athletes is only on the increase, and it's not healthy. I'm probably spitting into the wind. I understand that, but I hope that you'll take something away from this. I don't think I have a particularly popular position, but our cultural obsession with and idolatry of winning and winners is I would argue, not a good thing. Vince Lombardi summed it up years ago when he said, "Winning isn't everything, it's the only thing." And that quote is really quite reflective of our cultural values and our predisposition for winning. Only championship teams get invited to the White House, after all, and only elite athletes get multi-million-dollar contracts. So think about how many people, including probably some of you, are New York Yankees fans, even though you have no connection to New York City and maybe have never even been there. The Yankees have fans all over the country, and the only reason is because they win. Any of you Yankees fans out there? Yep. Can you tell me the difference between a Yankee Stadium hot dog and a Fenway Park hot dog? I'm sorry? Well, I can tell you, you don't have to go there. You can buy a Fenway Park hot dog in October. It's a cheap joke. Whenever a student in my class wears a Yankees hat, I use it, and if the Red Sox are not in the playoffs, I use it against the Red Sox fans. So, in any event, the success of the Texas Rangers is an example because we see Texas Rangers gear all over the country because they've been successful. So they've developed a national fan base. The Cowboys used to be called America's team when they were winning Super Bowls because the team had fans all over the country and achieved the highest ratings on Monday Night Football. But our reward system for winning is way out of kilter. Tiger Woods is once again the #1 golfer in the world, and is again the highest paid athlete in the world. Through June of this year, he'd earned $80 million. Of that, $65 million were from endorsements of one kind or another. Now, I suspect not many of you can even name the #2 ranked golfer. Anybody name him? Adam Scott from Australia. He won the 2013 Masters. As of August, he's earned $13.5 million, of which about $8.8 million is in endorsements. Now that's not too bad, that's not too shabby, but it is a difference of $65 million between #1 and #2. And another way of looking at it, Tiger Woods is making 600% more money than his closest competitor, 600%. So our obsession with winners has morphed into what some have called the winner-take-all society. And it centers on the idea that our value system is completely skewed towards those few people in society who win at the disproportionate cost of everyone else, who thus become losers, unable to share the spoils of winning. And this phenomenon is not at all limited to athletics, but pervades our entire society, if you think about it. Our reality television shows, such are many of our winner-take-all, such as The Survivor, The Apprentice, American Idol, and The Voice. A good example of winner-take-all is the NCAA basketball tournament. It takes the top 68 teams, basketball teams in the country, and ensures that every one of them but one ends the season with a loss. Now, I happen to love the NCAA basketball tournament, but the reason I love it is not because I care whether Kentucky or North Carolina or Duke or Kansas make the Final Four, but because I'm hoping that Cinderella teams like Bucknell, Butler, or Florida Gulf Coast, some school I'd barely heard of, knock off some of the big dogs. Now, I understand that athletics cannot exist without competition, but it's the societal excesses of competition that cause the problems. Athletic competition at its core is healthy and fun when competition is more the focus rather than the end result of winning or losing. When winning is the only thing, to quote Lombardi again, core values such as fair play and good sportsmanship often take a back seat. I think Joe Paterno had it much closer to being correct and had a much better perspective about winning than Lombardi. He once said, "We strive to be #1, but win or lose, it is the competition which gives us pleasure." In my opinion, schools like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and MIT have it right. Harvard sponsors 42 varsity sports, 42. Princeton sponsors 38 varsity sports, Yale 35, MIT 33, and all have extensive club sports programs. MIT, for example, sponsors 35 club teams in addition to its 33 varsity sports and has an additional 18 intramural sports. 20% of those pointy-headed intellectuals at MIT play a varsity sport, 20%. 73% participate in intramural sports. And about 80% of MIT students participate in some form of organized athletics as part of their college experience. The football team averages less than 1,000 fans. But if you go to one of their games, those kids are playing just as hard as the Dallas Cowboys or Penn State or any top college team. But the emphasis is on competition, not just winning. So if our jock culture and the reward system that accompany it are due to the excesses of competition, it's worth reflecting a moment on the inherent nature of competition. It means that one person or team is trying to defeat another person or team to make them losers. As a result, the winner wins or advances at another's expense. The so-called thrill of victory, at least in most sports, means success achieved by making another team or individual fail. Thus, one way to look at winning is that it's simply a selfish act, that I'm better than you. Further, winning at all costs also produces an entitlement mentality. Along those lines, Coach Bobby Knight has said how much it bothers him when a touchdown scoring wide receiver or a game-winning home run hitter thanks the divine being for his success. Knight says, does that mean that God has just sided with the winner and just dumped on the defensive back who allowed the touchdown or the pitcher who threw the gopher ball? Of course, his actual language is a little more colorful than that, but I cleaned it up. So our society actually admires and emulates athletes who are great competitors and who hate to lose, rather than identifying those individuals as self-centered, egotistical, narcissistic, and self-entitled. Now, let me repeat that I'm talking about the excesses of competition and so-called great competitors. Pete Rose was a great competitor, but in his case, is that really a compliment? Could anyone doubt that Lance Armstrong or Tiger Woods are great competitors? But does that have anything to do with their character or integrity? Presumably, all the performance-enhancing drug users in baseball, such as Ryan Braun, Barry Bonds, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, Roger Clemens, and Alex Rodriguez, are great competitors, but they are also all cheaters. LeBron James is no doubt a great competitor. But did he show any real character when he left his hometown Cleveland Cavaliers to bolt to Miami to join the more talented Miami Heat just so he could win championships? Does that mean he wasn't good enough to win championships in Cleveland? So the point is, and the point I'm trying to make is not that being a great competitor makes one a bad person. But it's just not that it does not necessarily make one a good person. By the way, there are significant social science data that concludes that competition is bad for us socially and psychologically, and that in education it is counterproductive to learning. That is, several studies have concluded that students learn much more effectively and efficiently where education is cooperative rather than merely individualized, with students competing against each other for top grades. One example of the negative effects of competition outside athletics is journalism, which is generally held in very low esteem by most of the American public. Does anyone really think that hyper-competitive journalists who are trying to break a big story before their competitors or write a news account that makes the front page actually produces higher quality, more accurate reporting? What we get instead tends to be sensationalized, overblown coverage with unreliable, self-interested sources and lacking in accuracy. Consider how the excesses of athletic competition produce societal behavioral problems. You've seen how much taunting and trash talking goes on in the NFL and NBA and in college football. That behavior is thus emulated all the way down to youth sports. Further, fan behavior and decorum is said to be at an all-time low. We even have a term for it, sports rage. Just last month, a Dodgers fan was stabbed to death by a Giants supporter near AT&T Park in San Francisco. 2 years ago, a Giants fan was brutally beaten on opening day in the parking lot of Dodger Stadium by Dodgers fans. Looting and rioting regularly take place in cities whose teams have just won a World Series or Super Bowl. Now, sports rage is also rampant among youth sports parents. They often behave just like that, abominably, in pressuring their children to excel and win, and abusing officials. In 2002, a hockey parent in Boston actually beat a parent of the opposing team to death outside the rink. In 2005, in East Texas, in Canton, a parent shot and almost killed his son's high school football coach because he didn't think his son was getting enough playing time. There are all kinds of examples of parents and youth coaches physically assaulting referees and umpires, and that doesn't even consider the frequent verbal abuse that parents and coaches heap on youth league refs who are often just 15 or 16-year-old kids. One of the worst examples is a brawl a couple of years ago in Miami between opposing coaches and parents during a T-ball game of 4 and 5-year-olds. And you can Google that, or it's and find the video. There's video of it. I've personally seen a dad thrown out of a third grade boys basketball game for abusing an official, and the only reason he left was because the official was going to forfeit the game if he didn't. Now, of course, it should be obvious that the winner-take-all syndrome, with its emphasis on winning at all costs, produces a huge amount of cheating. And cheating begets more cheating. It also produces distrust, resentment, and pessimism from the creation of an uneven playing field. Of course, Lance Armstrong is the poster boy for cheating, winning 7 Tour de France's and an Olympic medal while doping. He certainly earned that title, that is the poster boy of cheating, but the fact is that the Tour de France doping became an epidemic. 20 of 21 podium finishers in the Tour de France from 1999 to 2005 have been directly tied to doping. Along the same lines, cheating produces lying. Armstrong is also the poster boy for lying, taking the art to new lows. He bullied, threatened, and sued anyone who attempted to tell the truth about his doping. He even successfully sued the Times of London for libel and got a $3 million judgment, which he has now had to repay. Ryan Braun won a National League MVP award while on PEDs. He held an on-the-field press conference to deny that he'd ever taken anything illegal after an arbitrator overturned his first suspension. Of course, that was all one big lie. Now, ownership and regulatory bodies often look the other way when it comes to cheating. 2 good examples of the World Cycling Authority and baseball owners. Lance Armstrong's Tour de France wins increased U.S. TV ratings by 80% during those years, meaning that revenue from and exposure of the sport grew dramatically. The World Cycling Authority had every reason to look the other way while the popularity of their sport exploded. And in fact, it is well documented that its testing protocols were a joke. Armstrong's corporate sponsors also had every financial reason to stand by him in the wake of increasing evidence that he had systematically cheated and then lied at every turn. In August of 2002, Armstrong announced that he was no longer going to contest the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency's quote, one-sided, unfair witch hunt, end quote, against him. He was still denying that he'd ever doped, but he said he just wanted to get on with his life and focus on his family and charitable causes. His major sponsors like Nike, Radio Shack, Michelob Ultra, Trek Bicycles all announced they were hanging with him. Why did they do that? Because it made economic sense they made an economic decision rather than an ethical or moral decision, because it was to their financial advantage to continue to be associated with Armstrong. It was only when Armstrong admitted systematic doping and lying on the Oprah Winfrey interview that the sponsors started bailing out, because by then it no longer made economic sense to stay with him. In fact, you might be interested that the actual existence of the United States Anti-Doping Agency, USADA, is testament to the inability or unwillingness of individual sports federations to police their own sports. It was formed in 2000 by the U.S. Olympic Committee to be an independent cheating watchdog for Olympic sports because of the inherent conflict of interest of sports federations to self-regulate. And if I parenthetically, Barry, the guy that brought the head of the USADA, Travis Tigers, who some of you may have seen on 60 Minutes, is a former student of mine at SMU Law School, and he'd be a great lecturer for this series. Probably a lot better than me. Now, back in 1998, most of you are too young to remember this, but I know Kathy Sullivan will remember this, not that she's old. There was an electrifying home run race, a race to break the all-time home run record between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa. It really excited the country and brought baseball back into the public consciousness after the player strike, which had canceled the 1994 World Series, had infuriated and alienated many, many fans. Now, of course, McGwire and Sosa were bulked up on steroids. And although steroid use had been rampant in baseball for at least a decade, baseball had no drug testing program in place. So were the Baseball Owners and Players Association just looking the other way while trying to recover from the negative effects of the strike? You can come to your own conclusion, but baseball certainly did not need another black eye or scandal about that time, which would have had further economic ramifications from a reduced fan base and even lower television ratings. So in addition, our winner-take-all society produces a star system that results in a serious misallocation of resources. Simply put, striving for the brass ring produces far more participants than can ever achieve success. It's why people play the lottery even against infinitesimal odds, or why so many people go to Hollywood to become movie stars. The fact is that people far overestimate their chances of winning in those situations, where very few reach the pinnacle of success. Of course, this phenomenon goes way beyond athletics. It is ever present in sports. A few years ago, Sports Illustrated conducted a survey of all Division I starting basketball players and asked them if they believed they would play in the NBA. 65% said they thought they would become an NBA player. 65%. Now, keep in mind, that survey is all Division I, not just the kids starting at Kentucky or Duke. So it included the Ivy League schools, the Southland Conference, the Sun Belt Conference, all the mid-majors like UTA, Lehigh, West Point, Florida Gulf Coast. The real number of Division I starters who will play even briefly in the NBA is actually about 1/3 of 1%, not 65%. So just consider the misallocation of resources in men's basketball, where the graduation rates are typically the lowest of any college sport. Instead of taking advantage of a free education while on scholarship and earning their degree, many simply squander their chance at that education because they think they're going to be the next Dwayne Wade, Larry Bird, or Magic Johnson. Of course, Those that do make it typically have very short careers. The average careers and thus peak earning power of those who are fortunate to make the NBA, NFL, and the major leagues are quite short. The average NBA career is 4.5 years, the average NFL career is 3.2 years, and the average Major League Baseball career is under 4 years. Further, it's well documented that those who do make it in a major professional sport misallocate and squander the resources that do come their way. It's an astounding 78% of NFL players declare bankruptcy within 2 years of the end of their playing careers. 60% of NBA players declare bankruptcy within 5 years of the end of their playing careers. This is Allen Iverson with his $400,000 Mercedes Maybach. High-profile examples of bankrupt athletes include Iverson, who made $200 million in his playing career, $200 million. Scottie Pippen, who made $120 million. Latrell Sprewell, who made $96 million. Derek Coleman, who made $87 million, all bankrupt. Former heavyweight champion Mike Tyson made $400 million in his boxing career, but careened into bankruptcy in 2003. Former Dallas Maverick Antoine Walker made $110 million in his NBA career and recently declared bankruptcy. Along the way, he purchased 2 Bentleys, 2 Mercedes, a Range Rover, a Cadillac Escalade, and a Hummer. He sank so low as to be arrested in Las Vegas for 10 fraudulent checks to casinos. Former Hall of Famer football Hall of Famer Warren Sapp declared bankruptcy about a year ago and owed over $6 million to creditors and over $1 million to the IRS, which, by the way, is not dischargeable in bankruptcy. His assortment of 240 pairs of Nikes were put up for auction, and someone actually paid $6,000 for them, which is about $25 a pair. So lavish spending by nouveau riche athletes is legendary. According to one report, Iverson made about $60,000 last year playing basketball in China, while he was spending about $350,000 a month. About the same as he spent when he was in the NBA. A few years ago, Kobe Bryant gave his wife a $4 million ring after he was charged with sexual assault of a young woman in a Colorado hotel room. Is that really the best use of resources, even by a mega-rich star? Just think, he could have given his wife a $100,000 makeup ring, which is lavish by most standards, and donated $3.9 million to inner-city charities where money could have made a real difference, and the tax deduction would have paid for the ring. This necklace is on this slide is, by the way, a $16 million necklace that boxer Floyd Mayweather gave his fiancée. $16 million. Now, I should mention that there are world-class athletes who give mightily and generously to charitable causes, such as David Robinson, who donated $5 million to start a college preparatory high school in one of the poorest areas of San Antonio. Clayton Kershaw, who aged 25, has already established a charitable foundation, built an orphanage in Zambia, this is a picture of, and become involved in several inner-city projects in Los Angeles and Dallas. Other famous athletes making a difference include Dikembe Mutombo, who has donated $15 million to build a hospital in his native Congo, Warwick Dunn, Alex Agassi, and Eric Lindos are all noted for their philanthropy. But how bad is the winner-take-all syndrome in our sports culture? One outspoken cynic, John Gertie, argues that our youth sports have been taken over by compulsive, addictive adults, while collegiate and professional sports are controlled by money and greed. While that might be something of an overstatement, it's hard to deny that there's not quite a lot of truth to the sentiment. So what do we do about it? Well, I happen to think that the winner-take-all syndrome is so ingrained that both in our culture, both in and out of athletics, that the problem is largely intractable and insoluble. It's sort of like trying to bring lasting peace to the Middle East or to get the Republicans and Democrats to talk to each other in Washington. But just recognizing that we have a real societal problem can help, and that perhaps can alter individual behavior at least a little bit. So for example, in your own athletic activities, remember to enjoy the competition, the teamwork and the camaraderie, and take winning or losing less seriously. I'm a good example of this. When I was a kid, I was probably the worst sore loser on the planet. If my team that I was playing for or rooting for lost, I usually stomped off and burst into tears. And it really wasn't until I was in law school that I outgrew that. So I was a slow learner. So, but as a spectator or a fan, think about rooting for the underdog rather than just rooting for a team that wins for a team because it wins. I mean, so the Yankees usually win with a $200+ million payroll. What does that prove? In contrast, the Pittsburgh Pirates this year are a wonderful story. Small market, small budget team, made the playoffs for the first 21 years, and I'm rooting for them tonight. But do remember, if you root for underdogs, you've got to be prepared to lose more often. They are underdogs. Also, enjoy rooting for your hometown teams and your school teams, like your own UTA Mavericks. They are representing you, win, lose, or draw, so try to support them and be loyal to your school and your region. I had a great rooting experience on Saturday on the sidelines of the SMU